So what we're going to do now is move into our live panel discussion. Dr. Kerr and Professor Berlasso and Mrs. Kerr is going to be joining in, and this time will be moderated by Joan Jerkowski, and hopefully we'll have some time now to really take a little bit more time to think and to ask questions. That's what's been offered today. So Joan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'll go ahead and get started. I was going to start with Dr. Kerr and then go to Dr. Bertolosa and then Mrs. Kerr, and then leave in some time for the audience discussion. So Dr. Kerr, I'll start with you.
Okay, I wrote down 17 things. And the only conclusion I've come to at the moment is that Bowen theory and Dr. Bertolosa belong at the same conference with certainty.
Amazing.
So many convergences, as you said, and so thanks for being here, or they're here. So I'll pass on that now and come back later.
Okay, Dr. Bertolosa.
I can I don't want to take a lot of time because I have been talking for 1 hour and something. So, but what? Yeah, thank you again, because it's clear. But I would really like to listen, right? Also to concrete experiences that some of the participants should or might have, because from specific cases we can learn a lot, and maybe we can get even new insights. We have to take sometimes much more seriously, right, the concrete examples when we are able to put it in a wider theory, because there are probably important and relevant contributions that we can get out of them. Once say this, and so thank you again, and thank you for the comments or examples anybody here can bring into the conversation discussion, is the idea that if we take seriously the timing aspect, the dynamic aspect in terms of timing more than time, right? And we think differently, we understand differently the terms of biography, ontogeny, dependencies, constraints, attachment. We can really, probably, I think, develop a new epistemology about this kind of diseases. And epistemology, this strange word, in Italy, nobody is able to pronounce it properly, but they quite often confuse epistemology with epidemiology, which are two completely different things. So just feel free to mix up words, but epistemology is about the kind of evidences we are focusing on, what we are considering relevant in order to explain something, what we are looking at. And in this sense, I think that we can understand differently this notion of ontogeny, biological information, attachment, constraints, and so on. Because in a mechanistic culture, and not only science, because it's a cultural, philosophical problem, the very notion, the very term of constraint, the very notion of boundary sounds like a limit, like something negative. While instead what we are saying is that having limits, having boundaries, and being able to take over our own boundaries is the condition to develop, is the condition to be and to behave healthy. So just, John, I don't know, but just giving inputs and seeing if people is willing to contribute to jump into the conversation, also discussing things. I'm not saying that I have no final word, because there is a lot of work to be done here, clearly. So, and for example, I would really like Dr. Kerr to hear more about from you about this, which is not a tension in my understanding, but this relationship between individuality and the togetherness in the Bowen theory. Because in my understanding of living beings, these two dimensions should be differently understood as the concave and the convex of a same identity, I would say. We can always look at things from an individual point of view and from the point of view of togetherness. So it's, and that's why, sorry, and I will be quiet afterwards. No, because I'm adding a lot of information, so really I don't want to stress people here. From even an Aristotelian point of view, the very question, the most fundamental philosophical interesting question, is not about emergent properties. Is why the whole is in some way present and represented in all the single parts. So this is a very interesting theoretical and scientific challenge. If anybody has any insight or reaction on this point, I would be more than grateful. Yeah,
well, I'm going to go to Ms. Kerr next, and then I'll get the reactions of anybody else on the panel.
Okay, well, I want to thank Mike Kerr for inviting Marta Bertoloso, because this has just been a real treat. My mind has been exploding while I was listening to both of you. So I'll try to talk about the most wide themes that I have. Dr. Bowen used to talk a lot about how a family systems view was getting up at the top level of the bleachers and looking down on the family system from a wider point of view to see the interactions between the members. And I feel like Dr. Bertoloso has been up in a helium balloon above the top of the stadium looking down, which is just another treat. And then we have Mike Kerr's presentation, which is like going back and forth between the two. And then I hope tomorrow that I'll be able to present something that is trying to talk about bringing these ideas down to an individual occurrence of a symptom in a family system and in a work system. So that was one thought. Another was your comment, Dr. Bertoloso, on the war on cancer. I remember when that concept came out, I thought, good luck. Just good luck stamping out cancer, because my perspective has been cancer is going to always be with us. We might have more or less agency to deal with it, but that we're not going to be able to stamp it out. Another thought was the importance of timing. And again, I hope I'm going to talk about the importance of timing tomorrow. I hope I've concentrated on that in my presentation, and I'm hoping to convey convergence of a number of variables in a way that creates a perfect storm at a perfect time to discombobulate the physiology in a vulnerable person in the middle of a system. So I'm talking about cells in systems, but persons in systems. And several people mentioned, the last thing I want to say is, several people mentioned the concept of toxic workplaces. I think it's more complex than toxic workplaces, although certainly having the privilege to sit beside people and consult with them and consult with a number of people who have wanted to address their vulnerability in work systems. I think there are work systems that are more toxic than others. And I think that the work system I'm going to describe tomorrow at the point in time when I develop a system could be described as sort of toxic. But on the other hand, how was I vulnerable to that toxicity? How was I the squeaky wheel? Nobody else developed a life-threatening symptom in the same period of time. So I think it's a combination of head up, quote, toxic work systems and vulnerability of individuals within those work systems that can be best understood as interacting to potentially react with a physiological vulnerability in, if you will, psychologically, emotionally vulnerable individuals, and potentially generate a symptom. I'll stop there. Like I say, my mind has been exploding as I've been.
Well, I can agree with that. Other comments from people on the panel, Dr. Kerr or Dr. Bartolosa, would you like to add anything?
Well, I was going to try to tackle what I think was Dr. Bartoloso's question. And I may be repeating things I said before, I guess I'm not sure. But the way I like to think of individuality and togetherness is the flexibility to move back and forth appropriate and most adaptive to the situation. And togetherness can manifest itself in autocracies or selflessness. That for me was new experience with this current regression I think we're in. That there's so much me. You can't tell me what to do kind of thing. Anyway, I don't know if that's what you were asking, but I think it's the flexibility to appropriately move toward individuality or togetherness, and having the ability to do that in an adaptive way. I don't even know if that's what you asked exactly.
No, yeah, thank you. Yeah, please, Kathleen, yeah.
Dr. Bartolosa, did you want to say anything else about it?
No, I'm seeing that Kathleen is.
Okay, I saw that too.
Please, yeah, go ahead because I do prefer listening.
Well, this
Okay,
is
Ms. Kerr.
a question for Mike. Is that my understanding of individuality and togetherness is that when the individual and the system gets tilted more towards the side of togetherness without the flexibility to reach towards individuality, that more sort of like cancer cells, that more atavistic and primitive behaviors get activated that are not necessarily in the best interests of either the individual or the system. Would you say that's fair descriptively as you think about it?
Yeah, that atavism idea I think is real interesting that I talked about in my talk. The regression to far more ancient behaviors that technically could be overcome with a more thoughtful read of things. I don't know. What do you think?
Ms. Kerr?
Yeah, that without in a more regressed, more chronically anxious state, access to thoughtful alternatives becomes compromised, and feeling trapped in extreme either ors is more tuned up rather than the flexibility of more thoughtful processes, I guess is the way.
Makes sense.
Any more comments from anybody on the panel? Okay, I'm going to ask the question first, and then we have 3 people waiting for questions. Dr. Kerr, I was going to ask you, on your last slide, you said there's 3 likely components of a systems theory of cancer. One is a disturbance of family homeostasis, which I was thinking of as individuality or togetherness forces. Another is a disturbance in body homeostasis. And the other one was emotional regression fueled by chronic anxiety. And I was wondering what you meant by emotional regression fueled by chronic anxiety. How is that different than, I think you're saying something more than disturbance in the family homeostasis, but I was wondering what your thinking is about that.
Well, I'm thinking that chronic anxiety, which increases in a regression, is the fuel that powers how it plays out by maybe I don't know the answer to your question.
Well, I'll let you think about that and you can email me with your answer. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the audience discussion. And Nicholson, you're in there first.
Muted.
We can't hear you. Okay.
Okay,
You
can
know?
you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a real privilege to be here, and I certainly want to thank both of you for the quality of your thinking. And I know I'm going to have a lot of questions for Dr. Bartolosa by tomorrow. But Mike's thinking I have been following over 40 years. And it is just really wonderful to think about how that has evolved in that period of time and the contributions you have made, not only to my thinking, but I think to many others. And one of the thoughts I had about this morning's presentation is that systems thinking, either in terms of biology or in terms of the family, really does offer a balanced view of cancer. And, you know, it's not as simple as fighting the bad guys. And whether we're talking about Ukraine and Russia, or fights in a family, or biology and cells. But it brought to mind my sister, who had cancer, ovarian cancer. And in the 5 years that she was dealing with that, she would say to me, cancer isn't all bad. And I think it had to do with her evolving in many ways during that time period. And the way she approached art became very different. And from what she had done earlier. So I have this wonderful painting in my living room, which is a canvas filled with multicolored flip-flops. And I thought, you know, I just flipped out myself when I saw it. So she gave it to me for a Christmas present. And there's something about that, what goes into lightening up about the problems we face. And all of us can end up in a mess. And it's really about how you think about it. And that's what allows you to do something different. So I so appreciate this, and thank you so much for the entire opportunity.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I should unmute if I can find my way here.
Do it for you, Ann. It's okay. I know how to
Oh.
meet people.
That's what I like, somebody to do it for me.
Thank you so much. I'm going to mute you now. Okay, Kathleen.
Okay, Ms. Kerr, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, I'd like to draft on Ann's comment because I would say I've had the good fortune in my over 50 years of it trying to apply Bowen theory to my own functioning within my family system, my attempts to be a good clinician, etc., of having what could be called bumps in the road of symptoms developing in persons in my nuclear family or in myself that could be regarded as horrible, and which became gifts to make me rethink the way that I understood, to change my epistemology about myself and my family, and to rethink it in a way that was extremely mind expanding and useful. So I oftentimes think that a serious symptom, especially one that's even, I would say even terminal. I have known some people with terminal diagnoses that did not evade the death, but in which the symptom was such a stimulus to rethink things and change things that they died in a very different place than they were when they developed the symptom. So I think the idea of a symptom as a gift / wake-up call is a more neutral way to think about symptoms.
Okay, anybody else on the panel? Comment?
Well, I definitely agree with that. Some people have heard me talk about Jeffrey Rediger's book Cured, and it was just so interesting. People in a real jam who were able to come out of it and how they didn't or weren't able to. And the ones, everybody did something different. The one thing he emphasized in the book as a whole was probably the most important. It was what he called identity, and some realization on a person's part that they really weren't living their life the way they thought they were and needed to make changes, and that cancer was a wake-up call. I call that the gift of cancer sometimes.
Okay, let's move on to the next person. I think that's Mr. Frost in there. It's dark. Is that who it is?
That's him.
Okay, we've got the Kerr's name. You have a
I
question or
helped him
comment?
get into the meeting, Joan.
What? Oh, okay,
Because I helped him I sent him my link. So he's my doppelganger.
okay.
Yes, I'll just add to the appreciation others have voiced for this conference. I think it's on its way to being a real landmark.